I will begin by welcoming everyone on this icy evening to our regular session of Wednesday, the 2nd of February, 2022. And I will begin by asking our clerk to please call the roll.
Okay, Councilmember Rosenbarger, Councilmember Sims,
Yes, or I'm sorry, here.
Volin,
Here.
Scambaluri,
Here.
Sandberg,
Here.
Rallo,
Here.
Flaherty,
Here.
Smith,
Here.
and Piedmont Smith.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And to summarize our agenda this evening, we have 5 sets of minutes to approve, and 3 of them have already been sent to us with corrections. And those are from August 12th, 2020, regular session, October 14th, 2020, special session, December 9th, 2020, special session, December 16, 2020, regular session, and December 21, 2020, special session. We will have a series of reports this evening from council members, followed by 2 reports from the mayor and city offices. And then we will have opportunity for council committees to make reports. And then our first opportunity for public comment, a 20-minute period before we move into appointments for boards and commissions. Our legislation for second readings this evening will include Ordinance 22-04 to amend Title II of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Administration and Personnel, and that regards BMC 2.12, boards, commissions, and councils to make certain commission memberships easier to fill. Then we have no legislation for first reading, so we go to our second opportunity for public comment on matters not on tonight's agenda, followed by a discussion of our council schedule, and then we will be ready to adjourn. So let us begin with our approval of minutes this evening. And Mr. Roller, you are muted.
Very much. Madam President, I move approval of the minutes for the 12th of August, 2020, 14th of October, 2020, 9th of December, 2020, 16th of December, 2020, and the 21st of December, 2020.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Are there any additional corrections that need to be made to those minutes? And seeing none, could we please have the roll call to approve those minutes?
Yes, Councilmember Sims,
Yes.
Volin,
Yes.
Scambaluri,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
and Rosenbarger.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, and those minutes are approved. Moving on to council member reports this evening, let me begin with how I see you on my screen, beginning with Council Member Piedmont Smith.
I have no report this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. And Council Member Smith.
No report this evening. Thank you.
Moving to Council Member Scambaluri.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to extend an invitation to my upcoming constituent meeting on first Saturdays. So it would be this Friday, or excuse me, this Saturday, February 5th at 1:30 p.m. And we are continuing via Zoom. And you can join via the link. There's a button on my website at sueforcitycouncil.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sims.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I just want to say hello to my colleagues. I didn't get to see everyone before we got started. But what I'd like to do today is, many of us know that on yesterday, February 1st, that was the beginning of the Lunar New Year. And that is a celebration that, and mostly among the East and Southeastern Asian cultures, and that include the Chinese, Vietnamese, and Korean communities, amongst others. And it is a global celebration. And wherever that culture is, and particularly we have large numbers and large celebrations right here in the United States. So to all of our friends that celebrate that holiday, and even those that are not of that culture, but celebrate and interact, Happy Lunar New Year. Next, I'd like to introduce to some and remind others of a Black American named Carter G. Woodson. Now, Mr. Woodson was a historian and an educator, and he has been credited with creating Black History Month. Now, Mr. Carter thought that Black people should be empowered and proud of their heritage, and all Americans should understand the largely overlooked achievements of Black Americans. In 1926, he launched what was then called Negro History Week. This was later expanded to Black History Month in 1976, and a lot of the events and educational opportunities and interaction opportunities that we know today. This leads me to the city of Bloomington's Black History Month events this month. The theme this year is called Health and Wellness. And I just do want to say to Miss Beverly Calendar Anderson and Ms. Shatoya Moss, our Safe and Civil City Director, they had a great kickoff program on yesterday. Just very well attended and a great opportunity to interact and educate ourselves. I would also ask our community that we have a pretty robust schedule. The city of Bloomington has a calendar and schedule, and you can get to that online at bloomington.in.gov/BHM. Okay, I hope to see many of you at some of these events as we go throughout this month. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Sims. We have an exciting month ahead. Councilmember Flaherty.
No report, thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Boland.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to acknowledge the presence of Councilmember Sims and Councilmember Rallo yesterday at the unveiling of the renaming of Eagleson Avenue, which runs north-south through our city. It's unfortunate that the timing did not allow more people to attend because it's the middle of the day, but it was a beautiful day for the ceremony. It's certainly a contrast to what's coming tomorrow with ice and snow. But the ceremony was a good one and important. And despite the fact that there will be some inconveniences of the people who live on the newly renamed Eagleson Avenue, will have to deal with change of address forms and the like. What the mayor said in his brief remarks, I think really resonated, that names matter. And recognizing the names of a family that had achieved such tremendous educational accomplishment in their lives, both as what they learned themselves and what they taught to others, is far and away the most fitting acknowledgement that, you know, the renaming of the street is the least we can do to acknowledge them, I should say. But I also wanted to say that, well, I mean, I think I've said it. I had another thought, but it's gone now. I'm glad that it's happened, and you know, I look forward to all of us getting used to. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. It's not the first time in the city's history that we've changed the names of streets. You know, all you have to do is look at Lincoln and Grant Streets to realize that we didn't honor names of men like that before the Civil War because we didn't know who they were. And I think the same thing is here now. This is why what the mayor said is the case, that you can't know who somebody is if you've never heard of them. You can't know who they are, and so it's important that we call attention to our history in this way. So at any rate, I look forward to the greater ceremony in April that's being planned. But I just wanted to acknowledge that event in our city's history that also happened yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Boland. And Councilmember Rallo.
Thank you. Well, just to add on, it was an important event, the renaming of Jordan to Eagleson Avenue, and very important in Bloomington's history. And it was an extraordinary day, and it was very fortunate in terms of timing. And I just wanted to extend thanks to everyone who was involved in that task force for, I guess, screening many hundreds of potential names. And yes, Councilmember Volan summed it up well. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rosenbarger.
Hi, thank you. Quick report here. My February constituent meeting is Tuesday, February 8th. So this year I'm doing them on the second Tuesday of the month because the third and the fourth tend to get into holiday schedules a lot at the end of the year. So they are at 5:30 the first Tuesday of the month. And in February, we are having Michael Shermis, who is the Special Projects Coordinator from Community and Family Resources Department, come and talk about what he does and what's in the works in his department. So again, you can find that link on the council website, and it's Tuesday, next Tuesday at 5:30. Thanks.
Thank you. And that concludes our council member reports. We move now to the mayor and city offices. We have two fairly substantial presentations this evening. And so if no objections, I would like to grant additional time for both of the presenters. We'll allow them each 20 minutes. They may not need 20 minutes. I think I've been told it might be closer to 15. But in any case, we're going to be hearing an update reports on Plexus from Scott Robinson and Jackie Scanlon in our Planning and Transportation Department, followed by a report on review of city boards and commissions with our city consultant, Jonathan Ingram, presenting that. So again, with no further objection, let me go ahead and recognize Scott Robinson and Jackie Scanlon, and we will begin our first presentation of the evening.
Hello. Good evening, Jackie Scanlon, Development Services Manager.
Yes, we can hear you. We can't see you.
I can't turn my video on. It's been, something's happening. Hold on just a second.
Scott, you want to just fill?
Here I
Oh, here
am.
she is.
It's all yellow, but here we go. Okay, sorry about that. Good evening to you all. Thanks for having us here. As I said, I'm Jackie Scanlon, the Development Services Manager for the Planning and Transportation Department, and I'm here to give a report on Ordinance 2123. As you'll recall, Council approved a change to the UDO related to duplexes and triplexes in May of 2021, which was signed into law by Mayor Hamilton on July 12th of 2021. The ordinance contained language that stated the Planning and Transportation Department will track requests and approvals for the uses amended in this ordinance and report those findings to the Plan Commission, Administration, and Common Council every 6 months from the effective date. So the ordinance made duplexes conditional in the R1, R2, and R3 zoning districts, and triplexes conditional in the R4. It also required that the conditional use approvals related to R1 through R3 need to include a neighborhood meeting and must be seen by the Board of Zoning Appeals as opposed to the hearing officer. The council also placed a 150-foot buffer around newly approved duplex dwellings, which was originally proposed by the administration, around which new approvals cannot be sought for 2 years. And finally, the council also placed a cap of 15 per year on that use in those 3 districts. So the report is that the Planning and Transportation Department has spoken with 13 people about possible duplexes in the R1, R2, and R3 zoning districts. 4 of those conversations started before the legislation was even passed, and 9 have happened since then. 2 of those inquiries were stopped because the owners of the property had notices of violation on file with the Planning and Transportation Department, which is one of the restrictions in the use specific standards that you can't have that. And we have had no filings for conditional use for duplexes in the R1 through R3 or triplexes in the R4. So those related specifically, again, to Ordinance 2123, we have had no filings thus far. We have had 3 plexes approved in the residential multifamily or mixed use zoning districts since those became a part of the ordinance with the 2020 update. And we currently have 3 in those districts discussing with 3 property owners for that use. By way of context for development that we're seeing, we just wanted to give you some general trend numbers. In the second half of 2021, so that's roughly the time period since Ordinance 2123 was adopted, we saw 246 applications for certificates of zoning compliance related to Monroe County Building Department building permits. So that's our portion as the city planning department of a building permit. In the second half of 2020, we saw 348 certificate of zoning compliance requests. However, 135 of those were related to the buildings being built at the Trinitas project at 17th and Arlington. And then in each of the years, 2019, 2018, and 2017, oddly, we saw exactly 211 requests in the second half of each of those 3 years. So we aren't seeing a slowdown in overall building requests. We just aren't seeing an onslaught of requests, that some people were kind of worried about for this particular use. One note is that when speaking with members of the public, we have identified a potential issue with the current regulations. The current regulations require separate utilities for each unit in the R1, R2, or R3 zoning districts. This was included, you'll recall, to ensure that each unit functions entirely separately and maybe could help foster those units to be owned separately. We have heard anecdotally that owner-occupied duplexes in other communities do share utilities. So we aren't currently proposing any changes. We just wanted to bring this issue to your attention as we feel the cost of separate utilities in a conversion situation of existing building may be an unintended deterrent that you might want to address at a later date, similar to the issues we raised when ADUs were new, that we then thought about later. So that is the update. And then Scott has some more kind of general planning update ordinance information for you. And I'll be happy to take questions when he's done. Thanks.
Thanks, Ms. Scanlon. This is Scott Robinson, Director of Planning and Transportation. I just wanted to use this opportunity, if I may, to educate the public and everyone about the new UDO. I still feel like there's some languishing perceptions about the old UDO and the new UDO. There's been some changes. So just to kind of help everyone clarify that we're on the same page, the old UDO allowed waivers. So the Plan Commission could waive standards in the downtown districts. That's no longer an option anymore. The Plan Commission does not have that tool in their proverbial toolbox. So just to clarify that Plan Commission is not able to waive any of the UDO standards. Another one I wanted to raise, something in the past, we had use variances. So again, if you remember in the code, there's permitted and conditional uses, like in this instance, duplex is conditional. The old UDO, there was a process to allow for use variance. So those are situations where in your zoning district, if you don't have a permitted or conditional use, you could go through a use variance process. This UDO doesn't allow that. Only the uses that are listed in table 3-1 as permitted, conditional, or accessory, temporary, those are the only things that you can do. There's no ability to kind of change that unless we go back before Plan Commission and City Council to change those uses in that table. So I did want to point that out because again, sometimes we've heard like, well, gosh, we can't have this use in this district. Isn't there another way to do it without going back to council, or is there another process? No, there isn't. I think that's one of the trade-offs with maybe in the past where it was seen as being flexible, but then moving forward, we're delivering a code that has much clearer expectations and no uncertain outcomes with that. So there's expectation of what everyone's going to get. Another point I want to kind of raise, and again, just to treat this as an educational moment, some confusion about Board of Zoning Appeals and the hearing officer. Just want to remind everybody that these are quasi-judicial boards and they function in that way. What that means, just so everybody knows, that staff, members of the public, elected officials should not contact any member of the BZA or the hearing officer on any case related prior to the hearing. We've had some instances where there's been some confusion about that. Again, I just want to raise the awareness that that should not happen, because what that does is it sort of poisons the well before the case is being heard. Anyone can join those meetings. They have an opportunity to provide their feedback. If they're not able to attend those meetings, they can submit comments to the planning department, and we'll include those in the packet prior to the hearing. Or if you have questions, please call Planning and Transportation. Email us, contact staff. That's the appropriate way to have questions, provide comments, or anything that's on the Board of Zoning Appeals. So I just want to help clarify that, because it does seem like there's some confusion with those two boards and commissions, which is different than the Plan Commission and City Council. And then there's another little last nuance, again, is perception. Going through the last update processes, there was views that seem to think the Board of Zoning Appeal and Hearing Officer has the ability to waive standards, to approve things. Again, the code clearly spells out use-specific standards, like in this case, duplexes. Jackie mentioned a couple things that people were not allowed to move forward with, very clearly stated. And also there's criteria that they need to meet. So again, the Board of Zoning Appeals and Hearing Officer has very little leeway to allow for very subjective decision making and waiving standards. So again, we believe that provides a very clear expectation on approval processes. So I just wanted to highlight kind of some education about the old code and the new code and how business is done. And last, I just want to spend a few minutes to talk about things that staff is going to bring forward to address in the UDO. We're committed to bringing amendments forward to fix technical fixes, other things that we see, trends that we need to address. So we're in the process right now of developing text amendments. It's going to be very similar to in the past. We're going to package them up into technical amendments. These are Scrivener errors, typos, referencing. So we have some of those that we have to clean up that. And then we'll package together some amendments chapter by chapter so they're easy for everybody to find and understand. I will tell you ones that we are looking at right now. One of the ones that we're particularly interested in is to recalibrate the incentives for affordable housing and sustainable development. If you recall, the last time we brought forward an amendment was dealing with student housing projects in the definition of floor plates. And what we did is we lowered the floor plates for those projects that met the definition of student housing, unless they decided to leverage the affordability incentive. They were constrained to a lower building footprint. If they opted to go for the affordable housing option, they could go back to the higher footprint. Through the legislative process, the sustainability incentive was also included in that menu of options. What we're seeing right now is student housing developments we're grateful that they're moving forward with the sustainability incentive. However, we're not seeing much interest in the affordability incentive. So we need to recalibrate those so that we see it's not an either or situation with affordability and sustainability. We would like to see a win-win situation. And so that's one area we're looking to address to make sure that that these developments come in, really give a good look at both those opportunities for affordable housing and sustainability, and not or one or the other. So that's what we hope to do. And there's some other little amendments looking at with the Bloomington Hospital site and aligning that with the master plan, pretty minor. But again, we want to assure that there's the greatest opportunity for housing affordability and options within that redevelopment. So some technical amendments dealing with that. And lastly, we're looking to update fees. They have not been updated since 2013. That's an administrative function that goes just before the Plan Commission, but I want to let everybody know that we're looking to update the fees. Not a significant update, but it hasn't been done in almost 10 years. So that's another thing we're looking to do. So with that, both Jackie and I would be happy to answer any questions council members have, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson and Ms. Scanlon. And I was just hoping that we can get a little bit of that information that Ms. Scanlon provided earlier in writing. Is that possible
Oh,
to
sure.
have written? Okay.
I can send that.
I see hands up with council. We've got about 10 minutes for questions. Councilmember Rosenbarger, let's start with you.
Thank you. Thanks, Ms. Scanlon and Mr. Robinson, for your presentation today. Good seeing you both. I have a few questions, so I'll just start with one in order of appearance. The no filings for duplexes. I think in a way that's not surprising to me, because I think we made it quite difficult and unpredictable to have someone know if they could create a duplex. And Ms. Scanlon, you talked a little bit about potentially people aren't filing for them because of the utilities, having to have two sets of utilities, but I'm wondering if you have any other ideas, like why people aren't filing for duplexes, and with the upcoming amendments, if you're at all looking into bringing anything to make adjustments to that legislation in a similar vein to the ADU adjustments over time. Thanks.
Sure. So I would say, just from people we've talked to, I mean, I just think it's new. So when we reported, the first time we reported on ADUs to council after that was approved, and that was approved in October of 17, and then we reported, I think, to council in the summer of 18. We had only seen 4 requests. So that was actual requests. And as you said, it maybe wasn't as cumbersome, wasn't as costly as building, as hooking up to utilities and doing the complete separate and doing the duplex. So I think it's probably that it's new. People don't necessarily understand the process yet. For sure, at least one of the people we spoke to who then wasn't able to do it because of the NOVs was definitely going to do it, had that in their personal plans for some time. I think it's just kind of it's just not been explored yet. Of course, I would say, having having more regulation is going to deter people. So that's a deterrent. We did see ADUs pick up once we made those by right. As I said, in the first however many months that was, I think it was about 8 months or 9 months, we had 4. We've had 25 total since that legislation went through. It's a little bit less than 5 years. And we're talking to 3 people about ADUs this month. So I think making them be less regulated, which I don't know if that, if this council has appetite for that, making them be by right eventually, or in some other way, making it easier to do would be helpful. But I do think it's also just fresh. And then I'm sorry, I didn't write down the other questions. Councilmember Rosenbarger, if you could.
That is actually pretty much the answer to all of them.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any additional questions from council members? I'm seeing Councilmember Rollo, followed by Councilmember Boland.
Yes, thank you. I mean, my thinking is that it's a bit premature to conclude anything after only 6 months. I appreciate the data, and of course, it's very good to keep track of that. But Mr. Robinson or Ms. Scanlon, would you agree? I mean,
yeah, I think 6 months. Yeah, that's kind of
time.
I do think it's
difficult
early
to ascertain exactly.
Yeah, I think it's early. This is what you all chose to put in the legislation for us to come after 6 months and talk about it.
Yeah,
we haven't had any, so we don't have that much to say. But yes, I agree that as people get more familiar with it, that things will change, I think.
Okay, thank you. I have another question, but I can wait.
Yes, let's move to Councilmember Boland and any other council member that may have a first question.
Yes, could you, Ms. Scanlon, could you repeat the data you said for before 2020? I didn't catch that. So you said in the second half of 2020, there were 348 CZCs, but 135 of them were related to a single development over at 17th and Arlington. What about the previous years?
Each of the previous years, 17 through 19, in the second half of each of those years, we had 211 every year.
Exactly?
Yeah.
That's weird.
It was weird.
Okay, but so basically you're saying that there were 213 without the Trinitas development in 2020, and there was actually an uptick in development in 2021.
Yes, in number, yes. Mhm.
In number
And I
of
didn't break down by type of permit, but number
certificates.
of building permits we received requests.
Yeah,
for,
I know it's
yes.
not a reflection of the number of units,
Yep.
Total that were being built, but okay. And but you also said during the debate last year that there had been 13 months since the zoning ordinance had been approved, and that there were no requests for duplexes or larger, even in R4 and mixed use and residential multifamily. That was after 13
Yes,
months,
we
wasn't that
said,
right?
Oh, I can't remember the details of exactly what that was. There had been no request. I thought it was duplexes only, but I'm not sure. Yes, we've had 3 go through very recently, 2 under construction right now, and 1 that was a conversion that we didn't, we couldn't permit it for other reasons until after that conversation was through. So all 3 have
Okay,
happened
wait.
since that
Well,
time.
So you're saying 2 are being built new? They're not being converted old houses?
1 is a quad on North Lincoln, and I can't remember the second location, but it is also new, I believe, a duplex, and I can get that for you.
So only 1 house is being converted from a single family to a duplex.
In a multifamily or a mixed use district. Yes, that's what we've seen
Okay.
so far.
And again, there have been 0 duplex requests since April 2020 in R1 through 3.
Correct.
Okay, and that's even after we adopted the new ordinance in May of 2021.
Correct. Signed in July. Correct.
Okay. How long do you think is enough time before we know the impact? I don't agree with Councilmember Rallo that, because again, the argument last year was this paranoid expectation that whole blocks would be dismantled by bulldozers. I don't see anything even remotely close to that. How long do you think will be long enough for us to know?
I'm hopeful that we'll have some more movement when we come back in July because of, obviously the building season for 22 will start in a few months, and we were at the end just when the legislation got passed last year. So it may have been harder for someone to plan.
So last follow-up then is, would you say that the 2021 construction season was unusual? There were more certificates issued than in any prior year for the past 5, despite the pandemic. Do we have any reason to expect that 2021 was somehow an unusual construction year?
No idea. I would say just my own personal opinion would be people being home more than they had been in the past and really realizing that maybe that would be more permanent than they thought it was going to be and doing changes on their properties as a result, or, building new, that type of thing.
But despite the lumber prices, it didn't, last thing, despite the lumber prices, it didn't discourage construction.
The numbers say that it did not.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And we have a few more minutes left in this presentation. I see a hand up from Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. I wanted to thank Mr. Robinson and Ms. Scanlon for the report. It's really great. And I think it's a little early to determine a trend. Is there, no, thank you. The other council members asked the questions and you all answered. So thank you very much for the report. Appreciate it.
Okay, if there are no further questions from council, Councilmember Rallo, you had a.
Yeah, I just, since we were talking about the UDO, generally speaking, I wondered if I could pose the question to Mr. Robinson about, there's a desired urban form that is in the UDO, the Village Center. And I wondered if there had been any movement or any work that has been done by staff to assess the potential for village centers, locations for those, what it might require, and that sort of thing that you could discuss with council at some point.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I will say that when we went through the mapping exercise, there were locations that were zoned mixed use neighborhood. That's the intent behind those village centers around the community. So the many locations are kind of quote unquote pre-zoned or ready to go for that type of a development, but I'm not aware of any private sector initiative to implement one of those on a parcel by parcel basis. Obviously, there's energy that we're focusing on from a city perspective with the redevelopment of the hospital site. That's probably a little bit larger than maybe the neighborhood center that we're talking about, but there's certainly opportunities to energize that location. The trades district and some other locations around the community. But at a staff level, no, we have not put some energy into that. I will say that I have been kind of slowly working on promoting accessory dwelling units. If you all remember, as part of the Plex debate, there was kind of an overwhelming agreement that ADUs is a good way to go. We've kind of come to a reckoning since 2017, since there was some concern about that kind of building form. We need to encourage that. So I've been doing some research, doing some background coordination with various stakeholders in the community. Unfortunately, Omicron and other variants have kind of squandered my ability to hold any public workshops and that sort of thing. So I continue to kind of do some research on the background to try to help foster that. I attended a very interesting workshop held by the White House at the national level about ADUs and national trends. The good news that I have to report from that webinar is one of the things that has been a barrier to many trying to develop that type of housing device type is financing. It sounds like there might be some movement at the federal level to help change some rules on the financing side of the equation for ADUs. So that obviously will take some time, but that's some welcome news on that front for ADUs. But short answer, village centers, no, we have not, but I have been focusing some of my time on ADUs.
It is a desired form, though, that I think there's a broad consensus that we should pursue. Perhaps we can talk further later about, how that might come about, maybe incentives of some sort. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. We're coming to the end of our time. I see one more hand up for Councilmember Rosenbarger, and then we will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think this is quick. About the upcoming amendments that you listed, do those need to be noticed to property owners?
We will be following the notice requirements per state code. So what's going to happen this time, it will be noticed like a typical plan commission. We're not going to send out notice to all property owners because the changes are not substantial and they don't hit that threshold. There's 3 thresholds that we have to do in order to mail notices to all property owners. One of them's initiated rezoning city map like we did last time. The second one, I have to remember my memory, changing the use table. So if we change uses in that table, that's something that we have to trigger that. And unfortunately, I can't remember the third one right now off the top of my head.
Overlays.
Oh yeah, overlay districts. So if we were to create a, thanks Jackie for phone a friend there. If we were to establish an overlay district, that would be the third time that we'd mail that. So this, again, part of my kind of education and our point of being here is I did want to forecast our intent to bring forward some UDO amendments. There's been a commitment by the administration and staff to not let this sit on the proverbial shelf for many years, to make sure it's addressing the concerns that the community has. And so we will be bringing forward some of those before a plan commission and city council.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Robinson and Ms. Scanlon. I anticipate there will be a lot more follow-up from this initial report, and we appreciate it very much.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you. And next we have a report on the review of city boards and commissions. And this is going to be presented, I understand, by Jonathan Ingram, our city consultant. And if he can, oh, there's Miss Mary Catherine Carmichael. I believe you'll make some introductions.
I would like that opportunity. Thank you. I appreciate being here this evening. I am Mary Catherine Carmichael, Office of the Mayor. Tonight, I do have the pleasure of introducing Jonathan Ingram. He's a senior manager at Novak Consulting Group. You should be familiar with that name. Novak has completed 10 departmental assessments for us over the course of several years. Mr. Ingram will give a report on the assessment that was completed, the Board and Commission assessment that was completed in 2021. I also want to thank HR Director Caroline Shaw, who did much of the early work getting this reporting set up. So we appreciate her efforts. And I won't talk long. So Mr. Ingram has the majority of the time available. Thank you. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi there. Very good to be with y'all. Thank you, Mary Carmichael, for introducing me so kindly. Counselors, very happy to be with you this evening to share some of the key findings associated with our assessment of the board and commission structure, basically the citizen-led board and commission structure within the city of Bloomington. If it's okay, I have a PowerPoint to share. I'll try to share my screen here. I've been doing this for as long as you all have now, but I still manage to mess it up on occasion.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. Can you all see the screen okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so let me just, before we kind of jump in, you will notice that our colors have changed a bit. So most of you know us as the Novak Consulting Group. We are still the Novak Consulting Group, but we have kind of joined forces with Raftellus, and really same folks, same kind of focus area. We've just broadened our horizons a bit and provide some work in the water and sewer utility space. Right now, we're about the most experienced local government financial and consulting, management consulting practice in the nation. We have about 120 consultants across the country, providing services and just about everything that local governments engage in. We often say from accounting to zoos. So we've been fortunate to be working with you all over the past several years to sort of complete assessments in various departments to help advance some of the city's strategic goals and align resources and focus with those goals. And in last year, we were asked to take a look at the board and commission structure. So just in terms of what I want to cover with you today, just want to hit very high level, what's the project purpose and approach? Why were we brought in? I want to talk about some general observations and then just hit on some of the key recommendations from our assessment, which there's a report available. Hopefully you've had a chance to review that. If not, it's publicly available as well. And of course, any questions and answers. I know we're on a 20-minute time frame, so I'm going to move through the presentation pretty quickly, just to give you all plenty of opportunity for any conversation that we may want to follow up with. So project purpose and approach. So, generally what we were asked to do is to really evaluate the overall structure and alignment of the city's current sort of volunteer-led board and commissions, and really focus on kind of the mission, the focus of various commissions, and determine how best to structure your commissions going forward so that there is that overlap and sort of inconsistency in messaging, inconsistency in approach that may exist or may not exist is reflected in and boards are consolidated where it makes sense from a strategic perspective or where it makes sense from a subject matter perspective. We also looked at really clarifying and enhancing the board and commission management process. So the process for sort of how you go about filling vacancies, keeping folks on the commissions in the loop, and basically using the work of really your very talented board and commission members, using the work, using their energy, using their expertise to inform decision-making on a day in, day out basis from a policy perspective. But we also wanted to look at sort of how the board and commission structure is laid out now impacts staff liaison workloads. So many of these boards and commissions that you all have in the city, they take staff commitments. So we want to try to articulate that and look at opportunities to generate additional capacity among staff to be able to focus on more strategic issues within the city. So what do we do? So, there were a number of things that we did just from a methodology perspective. The first thing that we did is we spent a lot of time talking to folks. So we talked to 18 board chairs. We provided an opportunity to speak with every city council member. We provided an opportunity to have a conversation with you all. We had a chance to speak with most of you, not everyone, but most of you. We talked to about 24 staff liaisons. So we really kind of worked on engaging with those folks who are involved in the process, involved in board commissions, both from the volunteer, from the governing body, as well as the staff perspective. We also benchmark some structures among Indiana, among some other Indiana cities, including Fishers, Fort Wayne, Lawrence, South Bend. So just some communities of kind of similar size and complexity. Of course, Bloomington is unique, I think, and especially within the state of Indiana. So difficult to draw full peer comparisons, but we did look at some structures in other areas just to inform some of our recommendation development. And then we really looked just from a process management perspective, almost from a kind of a lean process improvement perspective. We looked at your board and commission management process, from agenda prep to volunteer recruitment to orientation, and how you all engage and with the public in a transparent way. So general observations about the board and commission structure. Right now, and this may have changed since we last completed kind of the assessment in 2021, but right now there are 49 boards and commissions, right? So one of the things to really emphasize here is this clearly demonstrates that one of the things that you all as a city value is transparency, is public engagement, and really collecting input from your community, from the vast amount of expertise to really help engage your citizenry with the inner workings of the local government. Each of these has been, added, with the community's interest in mind, right? So, the reason for adding these commissions are really usually in response to very specific issues, very important policy issues. But over time, what has happened is that many of the boards and commissions, have developed really overlapping missions, and it's created some confusion regarding role and accountability of kind of certain features. And it's also kind of compounded work and created redundancy in terms of moving sort of policy questions through the policy development and execution process. And this also, we see that this has done a couple of things. It's strained staff capacity. One of the things I'll talk about in a minute is just kind of the amount of time that goes into managing the board and commission process. And it's created some difficulty in recruiting and retaining members on the boards and commissions. There's really a number of commissions with significant long-term vacancies in terms of getting folks to fill them. And that really impedes sort of progress in that space and diminishes the value of those commissions. So we also see that there's kind of a lack of clarity in terms of how board and commission advice is sort of transmitted and utilized in the policy development process. So we've tried to focus recommendations to try to address these broad bucket issues. We also know that just from a management perspective, in terms of how the process is organized, it's a very decentralized process. So there's kind of a lack of central coordination, and it creates some inconsistency and inefficiency in terms of how each individual board and commission is managed. In some cases, vacancies are filled very quickly. In some cases, they remain open for extended periods of time. There can sometimes be very kind of limited communication to applicants, depending on the commission. And there's also no sort of central owner in the city of the onboard database, which is used to really manage the process. And there's also kind of an opportunity to enhance training for new board and commission members around kind of key housekeeping things in terms of open meeting laws, kind of roles and responsibilities of staff liaisons, kind of what the expectations are. So again, we built some recommendations in our assessment that speak to these issues as well. So in terms of just to kind of give you a little bit of context. So, when we look at your board and commission structure, we spent some time, talking with staff, engaging with staff to get some estimate of the amount of effort that goes into managing, those 49 boards and commissions. And when we looked at the structure and we sort of look at what's required in the charter, there are 20 that are, truly advisory. They are essentially boards and commissions that are used to inform sort of day-to-day decisions from a governing body, things like the Planning Commission, for example. But we also see that there are a lot of board and commission structures that provide opportunities for community engagement, but don't necessarily always translate into sort of clear policy actions. The responsibility of managing these 49 boards and commissions requires a significant commitment of resources every year. So when we went through and kind of spent time with the staff liaisons to get a sense of, how much time is this taking weekly, monthly, or there are seasonal variations that really impact. And what we're looking at is that it's the equivalent of about 12 full-time equivalent positions a year that goes toward managing the board and commission process. So when you start to think about the number of boards and commissions that you have, it's really important to think about, okay, what are these folks not spending time on. So, kind of thinking in terms of, what's the real staff commitment, what's the real labor requirement, and how does that divert from other strategic resources? That's an important sort of decision matrix, a filter to go through as you all, start to evaluate where you want to add commissions or make adjustments, consolidate, perhaps even eliminate commissions. So in terms of our core recommendations, there's a few areas where we've recommended some consolidations. The first recommendation in terms of consolidation is consolidating the Sustainability and Environmental Commission. So, each of these commissions, though they have some unique focus among each, they're fundamentally dedicated toward environmental stewardship and sustainability, and have a lot of sort of cross kind of overlap of role of function and projects and priorities. So, this is an area where I think there's a clear opportunity to sort of generate some cohesion and honestly eliminate some silos in terms of perspective and broaden perspective really from each of the vantage points of these areas. We also see an opportunity to consolidate transportation planning related functions under a new commission. So this is Parking Commission, Traffic Commission, and Bicycle and Pedestrian Safety Commission. So each of these are very kind of specialized, right? But they're all part of a broader sort of transportation planning bucket. And if you make adjustments in one of these areas, they tend to have, fundamental implications in the other areas, right? The way the process is structured now, if there's for example, a new intersection is put in, you go through a process with the Parking Commission, you go through a process with the Traffic Commission, you go through a separate process with the Bicycle and Pedestrian Safety Commission. Really combining this focus is going to streamline the deliberation process. It's also going to allow commission members to step back and think a bit more holistically about broader transportation planning related issues as they deliberate on the matters that are placed before them. We also kind of finally see an opportunity to consolidate some of the park, recreation, and urban forestry related commissions under the Board of Park Commissioners. So the Board of Park Commissioners, as you all know, is one of those sort of charter, it's defined in the charter, and it has some decision-making authority. The Environmental Resources Council and the Tree Commission, these are commissions that are, that serve a very important purpose, but they're also fundamentally informed by very specific, nuanced, technical subject matter expertise at the staff level. And then looking at kind of a couple of other, what I would say are sort of special interest groups, the Cascade Golf Community Advisory Council and the Banneker Community Center Advisory Council, really rolling these as subcommittees and significant focus areas of the board under the Board of Park Commissioners, again, allows that more holistic approach. So now what this does not do, for example, is it doesn't say, well, you can't continue to have citizen groups that focus on some of these sort of key areas. And honestly, there is an opportunity perhaps to create some citizen-led advocacy groups in this space that engage in a much more consistent way with the Board of Park Commissioners. In terms of, kind of the broader strategic focus of boards and commissions, one of the things that, we would advise, and this is really, kind of based on some of our benchmarking information, you all have far more commissions than really any of the benchmarks, really nearly 50% more with the highest comparison. And, it is advisable just from the amount of effort that's required to manage these commissions and the degree to which the proliferation of commissions can create silos in decision-making. We recommend that you all develop some very clear criteria that you go through as a governing body before you make decisions about adding boards and commissions. So really focusing on when is it required, right? Is this a function or a new review that's required by state statute? Are there sort of specific purposes or scope of commission that really very specifically supports your city's strategic goals? And just as importantly, is any of this work or any of these sort of areas that we're considering, does it align with the scope of an existing entity? And can we revise a particular commission to expand its scope, to enhance its scope, and then really pay very close attention. What's the staff level effort that's required to support a new board or commission? And then, of course, what are the other potential methods that the city has for getting feedback from the community on this topic? I think one of the things, and we see this often, one of the things when an issue kind of comes up in a community, one of the initial responses is, well, let's create a commission to sort of study the issue, right? And that can be great in terms of collecting, input and advice, but what you end up with is a structure that then carries on beyond the utility of that particular decision, right? So, really thinking through, okay, do we need a long-term system here? Do we need a long-term structure in place for this issue? Or do we need to find a way that has kind of beginning and end dates to gather feedback and really inform the policy development decision-making process? We also see a need to do a better job, taking the work of boards and commissions, all the time spent in conversation around kind of focus areas and policy areas, and create a very intentional way in terms of how that information gets collated and presented back to the mayor and city council, so that feedback can be really incorporated in the decision-making process. So there's lots of ways that you can do this, kind of both informally and formally. But kind of at a baseline level, we'd like to see that essentially each board and commission has a standard reporting requirement in terms of how it communicates its goals, its progress toward those goals in a given year, and that be done on a more consistent basis, both on a written format and potentially a presentation format to the city council on a recurring annual basis. We also see a need to just enhance some communication and transparency initiatives on the board and commission structure. Right now, every board, every commission really kind of records and posts the information, the meeting minutes in a very different way. Some meeting minutes are taken, word for word. Some are recorded in kind of bullet point format. Some meetings are streamed, some are not, right? So creating some consistent expectations around how citizens, how residents, how business owners can access and attend and sort of engage with the deliberations that happen at that level will really enhance the transparency and potentially create some avenues for additional volunteers to fill some of the vacancies that I've mentioned. We also would like to see the development of a more formal and transparent application process for boards and commissions. Right now, again, the nature of having a decentralized process without a single sort of point of contact to manage, you can often have vacancies that in positions that take extended periods of time to be filled. This can result in problems reaching quorum in meetings. It can lead to questions among commissioners about whether the city values work being done. When we really engage with the board chairs, this is one of the things that we heard is, when somebody kind of emails or submits an application, we need to have some very consistent standards and a process in place to be very intentional about that feedback and responsiveness as you move through the process, and that will really pay dividends in terms of generating volunteers for your boards and commissions. We also look at again training and onboarding. So there's some inconsistency again in sort of how new board and commission members are acquainted with both the work of their board and commission, sort of what they're tasked with, what their expectations are, what are the rules and regulations associated with becoming essentially a public figure that need to be sort of understood and reflected, open meeting laws, for example. So being very intentional about what that onboarding process looked like. Just like a new employee orientation, right? What are the key things that they need to know in order to be equipped to sort of engage in that in their new task? And we also want to be a little bit more intentional about how we define the role of staff liaisons. So when we spent time with staff liaisons and tried to understand the amount of effort that sort of goes in to each board and commission, it really varies pretty considerably from one board and commission to the other. And I think there are kind of some inconsistent expectations. In some cases, staff are serving or are almost serving as staff to the board, where they're running down research projects, they're organizing events, they're spending considerable sort of time and effort managing the agenda and minute process. And others, it's as simple as sort of creating a space for folks to gather and have conversation and providing a pathway to elevate important points in the policy conversation. Creating some standard expectations for what does it mean to be a staff liaison, and this is a city effort, right? This is something that needs to come from the city to say, okay, what do we expect? What does it mean in terms of level of effort? What sort of tasks should a staff liaison be engaged in versus what should the board and commission members be engaged in, right? So creating some clarity around that will pay dividends, especially from the staff utilization perspective. And then, lastly, we see the need to assign sort of oversight of the board and commission process to a designated position. Right now, the onboard software is used to accept applications, fill vacancies, really maintain that database. But each department is responsible for updating its own information, and that's created some real inconsistency just in terms of standard operating procedures. And the data that's within that system is often outdated and unreliable. So creating a central sort of coordinating point to really manage that system and make sure that it's useful for both applicants and city staff, as well as the governing body, we'll add some significant value in that area as well. So with that, I will unshare my screen and open up to any questions you all may have.
Thank you, Mr. Ingram. And we are at our 20 minutes. So with no further objection, let's allow about another 10 minutes for council questions. I see a hand raised from Councilmember Volan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the report, Mr. Ingram. It's very interesting. Just to be clear, you were hired by the administration to do this report, right? I mean, this was not an initiative of the council.
That's correct.
Okay. Was the base question you were asked to answer with respect to, I mean, we have a sustainability ordinance that talks about the environmental, social, and fiscal impacts of any given decision that we make that we need to think about. Yeah. Was fiscal impact the only concern that you were tasked with studying? Because it sounds like the primary goal was to reduce the amount of staff time, devoted to
Sure,
boards and
yeah.
commissions.
I appreciate the question. So no, the marching orders as they were not to simply look at the fiscal impact. That is one factor to consider. I think the more important question, and I'll answer it this way, had we looked at, had staffing impact sort of been, the primary driver, we would have maybe merged a few other commissions. Our primary focus is if there's overlapping strategy, if there's overlapping focus areas of commissions, if there's an opportunity to create a more consistent and holistic vision in a particular subject matter, that's really kind of the first and most important factor to consider as to whether or not there's an opportunity for any consolidation in the board. Now, is staff impact and staff time important? Absolutely. You all are a very progressive community. You are engaged in a number of strategic initiatives at a very high pace. And you also have constraints in terms of budget, right? So, one of the things that we try to do as a firm and that is, where can we find capacity within the resources that you have and redirect that capacity toward sort of significant strategic initiatives. So the question to us is what gets lost? And
sure.
Consolidations. Yeah.
Sure. I've got more questions, but I'll just defer to others.
Okay. Yes, let's see if anyone else. Councilmember Smith, I see your hand. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ingram. It was a great report. Fantastic. I've long thought that we have too many boards and commissions and they could be consolidated. I'm going to ask you this question. In your analysis, in your report, so if you combine, say you combine 3 different commissions, with the combined total of, 18 people, does your analysis or your expertise recommend how do we figure out the number of people that we would like on the newly consolidated commission?
So there are lots of schools of thought out there, and you want to balance the ability to create opportunity for expertise with the need to kind of be efficient in the process. The more commission members that you add in the process, the longer it takes and the more challenging it can be to sort of reach a decision point. Usually, it can be 5, 7, 9, you just want to focus on an odd number. If you start moving sort of deeply into the teens, I would probably pump the brakes a bit. But what's really, I would say, most important, what's to drive the structure is what are the types of expertise that we would like to see on this board, right? What are the skill sets among the volunteers, and maybe focus on rounding out that skill set as a basis rather than focusing too much on what the ultimate number should be. But again, don't move too far into the teens. So,
thank you. And will that type of a recommendation be included in your report?
In terms of spelling out what the number should be, we haven't articulated that. It's really mostly focused on, so I think there's kind of room for discussion and deliberation among city staff, the governing body, and the mayor's office on that.
Thank you, Mr. Ingram. Great report. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you. And I see Councilmember Scambolori's hand.
Yes, thank you. This was fascinating. I appreciate this. Not so much to contradict you, but perhaps to put a finer point on your statement. You mentioned that we should be thinking in terms of skill sets that are needed to do a given set of work. I would also add, beyond just skill sets is also perspectives.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily tied to just a skill. It might be tied to a perspective. So I offer that thought.
That's a great clarification. And absolutely.
When you have recommended to other cities and towns that they consolidate, and I realize it's a very broad question, when you've recommended to other cities and towns that they consolidate or blend or streamline, I guess my ultimate question is, what happened to public input? What did they say, gosh, we're not getting the input that we needed anymore? Or, you know what? Public input didn't suffer at all. We're getting, the same quality of input and better quality input.
Yeah.
So can you comment on that?
Yeah. So I think, what's important is that there is opportunity to engage, that the citizens, that the folks who have an interest in engaging know how to do that, right? And as long as that's maintained, I don't see significant concerns with now I don't have this avenue for public engagement, right? It's just a question of how you align it from a strategic perspective. If there is a group of citizens who feel like who have something to say, who feel like they don't have an avenue to say it, you as city council are going to hear about that. Right. And that's one of those things that's going to kind of help you all determine whether sort of additional modifications might be necessary. But I have not seen any adjustments that we've recommended, because our goal is not to decrease transparency or the opportunity for engagement. Our goal is to make it as valuable as possible, to build a structure that helps take that information and convert it into policy decisions.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council questions? On a first round basis here, I'm not seeing any first round questions. Go back to Councilmember Boland. Did I see your hand again?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Ingram, the one recommendation you made for consolidating commissions was sustainability and environmental. According to your Appendix A, the Environmental Commission requires 22 hours of staff time a week. Sustainability requires 2. First of all, how do you see that consolidation as saving that much time? And second, there are at least 3 other commissions: the Bloomington Arts Commission, the Urban Enterprise Association, and the Council for Community Accessibility, that each take 25 hours a week or more. How is this really going to help save much of anything?
Well, again, so the primary goal is not to consolidate staff time. If there are places where it makes sense strategically to consolidate based on mission and based on focus, then do that. It may generate savings, but that's not the primary motivation in terms of why we would recommend consolidating boards and commissions. It is a benefit. It is an advantage. It's something to consider in part of the decision-making process.
So let me get this straight. You're in the course of streamlining and consolidating, you were not directed to try to save staff time.
Oh, it's absolutely set up as a parameter, but it's not the parameter. You see the distinction? So what we know, right? So in terms of how the project is defined, we know that we're spending a lot of time as a city engaging in the board and commission management process, that there is inconsistency in sort of how much time is committed across various groups. We want to look if there are, and we also know that there are a lot of boards and commissions that could perform very similar missions, right? Let's look at our structure and see if these issues can be reconciled. Right.
Okay, well, hang on. I get the ideological idea that the commissions might have overlap. That I understand that, but you say that we're spending a lot of time. I mean, if it's not staff time, whose time are we concerned about?
I don't understand the question. It is staff time.
Well, yeah. I mean, you said it's staff time is not the primary concern, and yet there is a concern that we are spending a lot of time on all these various boards and commissions. I don't understand the difference. I mean, if it's not staff time, whose time are we concerned about?
You are concerned about staff time. The distinction that I'm trying to make is that the purpose of this project was not to go in and save staff time.
Okay.
That wasn't the directive, right? Okay. So I want to be, there are a number of issues that we were asked to look at to see if these issues can be reconciled in a way that maintains the role and function and value of boards and commissions. if we have an opportunity to generate staff time savings or create some efficiencies in terms of how similar commissions are managed, that's an advantage, right? And as you think about adding new commissions, it's very important to think about what that means in terms of organizational capacity. And these things are all, they are all true. It's not an individual sort of motivation that I think that drives our analysis.
Okay, thank you for that extensive answer.
I see a hand up from Councilmember Flaherty.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ingram. You just mentioned that you were tasked with looking at a number of different things as part of this review. Is that right?
Correct.
Was it, I don't think I'm mistaken that the council wasn't invited to weigh in on what should be reviewed or analyzed. Was it discussed at all whether the city council should have some input on that directive and what things we should be examining?
In terms of the project scope, that would be something that occurred before we were engaged in the process. I don't know that I could speak to that.
Okay, thank you. I do have a second question, but I can wait till another round.
Are there any additional first round questions? Councilmember Sims.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Ingram, for the report. Very interesting and well informed. Thank you very, very much. My specific question, and you've divided them by tables or topics. And I'm looking particularly at the cultural boards and commissions.
Sure.
And I guess my direct question would be, when you were doing comparisons with peer cities, and you mentioned Fishers and Lawrence and other places like that, specifically with cultural boards or commissions, what is the methodology or how can you compare when, say, cities may have different values in certain areas or vastly different population differences? So does that make sense?
It absolutely does. I totally understand.
What was your methodology there? And share with me what you think.
It's really just, so the methodology, and I will say sort of how it, when we do benchmarking, it doesn't matter whether we're doing it for boards and commissions or for any other department. We use it to just give us some context of comparison, but we very rarely draw very specific recommendations from that. So for example, what we focused on, we didn't recommend eliminating any commissions or eliminating any focus areas because your board and commission structure needs to reflect what your values are as a community. It's okay that you have way more, right? That's okay. So there's no judgment. There are just there are some challenges with managing that much engagement, that many board and commissions. So it's really about aligning mission rather than saying Fishers doesn't have that commission, so you shouldn't either, right?
Thank you. Well, it's unfair. I was going to ask you to compare Bloomington with, say, Fishers, specifically with a commission like the Commission on the Status of Black Males, for example. But I'm not so sure that's fair. So I'll retract that. At least this evening. It's something we could talk about later. Thank you for the report.
A lot to think about for sure. All right. Any other first round questions before we go back to the second round? All right. Seeing none, Councilmember Volin.
Thank you. I have just two more questions. The first is, was Novak asked to compile the amount of staff time devoted to task forces created by the administration since 2016?
We were asked to look at the amount of time committed to the city's boards and commissions, or honestly, that's something that we evaluated. There wasn't any additional nuance beyond that,
okay. The other question I have is, I haven't had a chance to read the whole report, but did it ever enter your thinking as a consultancy to recommend that, right now, every commission is supported by somebody who's already an employee of a given department. Was it something that you contemplated to devote staff who are not part of a department, but who just support boards and commissions, since even if we reduce them, there's still going to be quite a few? Is that the kind of thing that you might recommend? Like, do other cities by any chance have a department of boards and commissions?
No, I've never seen one, and I would say for good reason. Most of your boards and commissions, all of them, are going to have some specific focus that intersects with the mission and focus of a given department. Who you assign as a staff liaison is contingent upon an overlap, again, of some of those functions, right? So it's about leveraging expertise, connecting this citizen advisory group that even under the best of circumstances cannot have an in-depth understanding of the inner workings of your city government, and connecting them with a subject matter expert on the city side. That's how it worked best, right?
Sure, but I mean, the clerical task of meeting times, appointments, coordinating interviews and the like, those are all ones that boards and commissions have in common. Wouldn't there be some benefit to a clerical consolidation?
So one of the recommendations that we made is that function be centralized. The most logical place and the place where those sort of administrative tasks are typically centralized is in a clerk's office in most local governments. So, those administrative details in terms of scheduling open meetings, getting minutes posted, making sure that there's links so that citizens can watch the meetings from their home, right? And those do tend to be consolidated in a more administrative function. Yes.
Understood. And last question is, was the clerk's office involved in this study at all?
We did in the clerk's office, yes.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. And I do believe we have exhausted our questions. Thank you, Mr. Ingram, for the report. And I see one more hand up here in the final analysis, Mr. Flaherty.
Yeah, my apologies. I had mentioned I had one more question when we signed up last time. I didn't raise my hand again. No, that's okay. Thank you. I just wanted to ask about, there were a number of recommendations related to communication and transparency and unifying procedures with regard to boards and commissions. Would you say that those types of recommendations would generally apply to task forces or time limited entities that are looking at questions like that as well, Mr. Ingram?
In terms of establishing sort of a clear expectation of involvement, transparency, and communication, I would say yes.
In things like recording audio and video and posting agendas and the like as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I'm seeing a hand up with Clerk Nicole Bolden. Do you have a comment?
Yes, if you don't mind, I just wanted to clarify something really quickly. Mr. Ingram is right that there was an interview done with the clerk's office about the boards and commissions process, although not necessarily about some of the recommendations that came out of the report. And some of the assertions in the report were based on what seems to be an incorrect reading of either the clerk's duties or the Bloomington Municipal Code. So just wanted to put that out there. So.
Thank you for that statement. And with that, I do believe we are past our allotted time here. I don't know if we want to go on. Councilmember Voland, do you have one more thing?
I did one more thing. In the Appendix A, it says there were 15 different commissions whose estimated staff time was not available. And the total of those that were available is, of course, less than the total amount of hours that you cited as being devoted to staff time every week. Could you comment at all about the not available? Why were they not available, and how did you make an estimate when they weren't available?
Yeah, so we just in terms of access, in terms of interviews, and just the number of, the amount of information and kind of data was available in terms of pulling estimates. We just tried not to include data that we couldn't point to. And again, they are estimates based on conversations. So there aren't timekeeping systems that kind of track this data. So I would keep that in mind.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will just conclude by saying this report is good food for thought. I'm sure it's going to provoke a lot more discussion going forward. These are recommendations. This is a report given to us based on the findings, and it's up to us to determine what we will not be doing with this moving forward. So thank you all for your time and attention. We appreciate this. Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you very much.
We now move on to council committees. Are there any reports from council committees this evening? And I am not seeing any. So let us now move to our first opportunity for public comment. This will be a 20-minute period on matters not on tonight's agenda, and that includes the reports that we have just heard. But if anyone is here to make a comment on something that we're not going to cover later this evening, feel free to raise your hand or text us into the chat message, and we will be glad to recognize you. And I see Miss Lacy is here to help us begin the conversation.
Yes, it looks like Clerk Bolden has her hand raised and she should be able to unmute. It's not clear to me whether it's her intention to speak again or not.
Nope, my apologies. I just didn't lower my hand. Thank you.
Thank you.
And next we have Greg Alexander, who should be able to unmute.
Hi, my name is Greg Alexander. Thanks. I wanted to give you all a little update on an ordinance you passed back in November 2020. The ordinance established fines for misuse of the public right-of-way, especially at construction sites. And I wanted to let you know how that's going. This story is at the construction site where Brownstone Terrace used to be on 14th Street between Dunn and Walnut. They'd gotten a maintenance and traffic plan approved by the Board of Public Works, a relatively complicated one, a lot of phases, closures of sidewalks and of the street. And they got to one of the phases and simply abandoned the plan. They were blocking the sidewalks without signs or detours or any of that. Staff was a little lenient towards this conduct, and honestly, I was really skeptical. But when the contractor refused to address it in a timely fashion, staff issued an ultimatum, told them to get it in shape by December 31st or fines would begin. One of the most frustrating things about the way it used to work is contractors would respond to these directions from city staff by temporarily coming into partial compliance. And that's what they tried to do here. At 1 week into January, they came into partial compliance. But staff kept applying fines for another week until they came into full compliance. In the ordinance you passed, the fines are structured as escalating fines. The second week of fines was much more than the first week. That got the attention of higher ranking people at the developer. They objected. They went to the Board of Public Works to appeal the fines. They said they should not pay fines for the week that they were in partial compliance. This question of whether they need full compliance came before the Board of Public Works. And again, I was worried enforcement would fall apart, but last night the Board of Public Works upheld the fines. We've established the precedent in Bloomington that full compliance is necessary. Obviously, even with enforcement, there was well over a month where pedestrians were walking in the street on Dunn Street. This is not mission accomplished, but it represents a significant change and it successfully got the developer's attention. This is very promising, and I want to thank the council, city staff, and the Board of Public Works for all the work they have done. Contractors are learning for the first time they have to take their maintenance and traffic plan seriously. This is amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. And I didn't ask to see a show of hands as to how many people would like to speak at this first section. We typically allow 5 minutes per person if it is 4 or less. Do we have anyone else with a raised hand?
I don't see anyone else, and I do not have any messages in the chat.
Okay, we'll just give a minute or two. Again, I want to remind everyone that if you do have comments for council, there are many ways to get in touch with us, including emailing your comments to council@bloomington.in.gov. So again, we are delighted to hear from the public during this opportunity. We'll have one more at the end of our meeting tonight. And please email us with any comments that you may have from things that are generated from tonight's discussion. So do we see anyone else at all?
No.
All right, let us move on now to any appointments to boards and commissions. Do we have any this evening? And I'm not seeing any council hands raised. I will take this opportunity to make a correction to the Climate Action and Resilience Committee. I had erroneously made that assignment in our last meeting. I wanted that to remain the same as it was, and the chair, Councilmember Flaherty, brought it to my attention. And my apologies to Councilmember Rosenbarger and Councilmember Smith, but that committee consists of Councilmembers Flaherty, Piedmont Smith, Rollo, and Smith. And so I need to make that correction tonight on that particular assignment. And then also that will need to be corrected in the minutes the next time we adjust the minutes from the last regular session. All right, so with that, we are now ready for legislation for second readings and resolutions.
Madam President,
excuse me.
Yes.
When you ask for a correction to the minutes from the previous meeting, can you clarify that for me?
Well, when I made the announcement erroneously, and I believe that was at our last regular session, I misappointed the committee. I'm correcting it tonight. So I just want the last meeting's minutes to reflect that. We can get to that when we get to it. But
Okay.
are you clear as to what the assignment is?
I understand what you're asking for. I think we may need to discuss it further.
Okay.
Thank you.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilmember Volin.
I think that what it sounds like what you meant to do was simply to, I mean, I don't think the previous minutes need to be corrected. You simply, because you misspoke, that you're trying to correct. I mean, what you said now can just go into tonight's minutes. Isn't that sufficient to clarify the assignment? Yeah.
Right. I made a mistake at the last session and I'm trying to correct it tonight.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think it needs to correct the prior minutes. I think it just goes into tonight's minutes.
Got it. And we can discuss this with the clerk offline, but thank you for that.
Thank you.
Again, my apologies for not making the correct assignment. It was to continue as it had been. That was my intent. So hopefully we have that cleared up. All right, now we are ready for legislation for second readings and resolutions.
Madam President, I move that ordinance 2204 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Yes. Oh, Councilmember Volin,
Yes.
Scandaluri,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Rosenberger,
Yes.
and Sims.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. We need to adopt it.
The clerk is going to read first, I believe.
Oh, and will the clerk please read?
Ordinance 2204 to amend Title II of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Administration and Personnel regarding amending Bloomington Municipal Code 2.12, boards, commissions, and councils to make certain commissions memberships easier to fill. The synopsis is as follows. This ordinance is authorized by Councilmember Volin and amends Title II of the Bloomington Municipal Code, Administration and Personnel, to adjust the membership requirements of various commissions. It changes one seat on the Parking Commission from mayoral to council appointment. It also reduces the number of members on the Citizens Redistricting Advisory Commission from 9 to 5 and simplifies the membership selection process.
Thank you.
Madam President, I move that ordinance 2204 be adopted.
Second.
All right, moving forward, Councilmember Volin, are you prepared to present?
Yes, I don't have any visual aids here. I think that the ordinance speaks for itself pretty straightforwardly. It again changes one seat on the Parking Commission from mayoral to council appointment. It also reduces the number of members of the of yet unformed Citizens Redistricting Advisory Commission from 9 members to 5, which would be 2 Democratic representatives, 2 Republican representatives, and 1 independent who would be the chair of the commission. This would be to make it easy. We just didn't have enough applicants to do a 9-member commission. The county got by with 4 members for redoing the county, and the initial commission proposal was based on a statewide proposal presented by the League of Women Voters, and 9 people might be appropriate at that size, but I think 5 is plenty. And it would allow us to name the majority, if not all, of the 10 candidates necessary to determine the 5 representatives within the month of February. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions regarding this ordinance? Councilmember Sims.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing this, Councilmember Bolin. What type of feedback did you get from the administration with regard to that seat on the Parking Commission?
Well, I mean, the point I'll just make is that that particular seat has been vacant since August of 2019. And I think that that feedback is all I needed to to know. I've
So-
asked on multiple occasions for the administration to name somebody to that seat, and they have refused. And so, I mean, the seat is for a citizen. I don't think it's that hard to find somebody in the city of Bloomington who'd be willing to serve in it, but it's been 2.5 years. So I would invite any comment from the administration, but that was my conclusion based on their feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Additional questions regarding ordinance 22-04? And not seeing any additional council questions.
Madam
Let's move-
Chair,
Yes,
I'd like to invite the administration to comment on the ordinance. I don't think they were given a chance to.
oh, Mary Catherine Carmichael, would you like to? Yes.
Hi, Mary Catherine Carmichael, Office of the Mayor. Thanks. I was just waiting my turn. I understood it was still council time, so I was waiting. Yeah, it's been a struggle, certainly keeping that commission filled. I think that, I couldn't help but notice that you're changing the number on the redistricting committee because you couldn't find enough good applicants. And so, especially during COVID, this has been a challenge for us, although I do understand this is a longer term issue with this particular commission. I would say that to have a seat change from mayoral to council is pretty atypical if you look at it from a state statute just kind of custom. But if this is something that Councilmember Bolin feels strongly about, this is something that certainly is within your power to change.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Councilmember Boland, do you have a question? Or?
Sure. Just a brief response. I do understand that it's a challenge to populate commissions. We certainly saw the report tonight. The administration certainly feels strongly about that. So I do sympathize with the challenge. I will say a couple things about that. One is there's at least one commission we have where 6 of the 9 seats are council appointees. So it's not like this is unprecedented. Secondly, this is, as the report that we heard tonight shows, this is not a statutorily required commission. It's something that we believed as a city was important here. But I'll also note that, I have been concerned certainly with the ability of the commission to do business as long as it's existed. And that there have been multiple opportunities over the past 2.5 years to name people who actually the council wound up naming when a seat became open for a council appointment. So, with all due respect to the challenge, I do believe that the council can fill this seat reasonably quickly, and I have every confidence it'll be able to do so. So again, I think this is a minor change, and it's important to note that the administration is still well represented on the Parking Commission, and discussion of whether it should continue to exist or not is one for another day. But there's still plenty of good conversation happening. But we've never been at full strength, and it would be nice to have a 9-member commission for the first time in its history. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I add one more comment? Or
yes.
Yeah, we've had a high amount of turnover on all boards and commissions during COVID, but especially this has been kind of a longer term issue with the Parking Commission. So it has been problematic, and I'm sorry that we weren't able to keep it fully staffed. It's been a problem.
Thank you. Any additional council questions before we move on to the public? All right, seeing no council questions, we see if there are any members of the public who would like to comment on ordinance 22-04. Not seeing any hands raised, are you?
No, there are no raised hands, and I do not have any messages in the chat.
All right, let us go ahead and come back to council for any final comment or questions. And not seeing any hands raised. Are we ready to call the question on ordinance 22-04? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Scambaluri,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Rosenberger,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
and Volin.
Yes,
Thank you all. And that passes 900.
thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. And we have no legislation for first readings this evening, so we move for one last time for public comment on matters not on tonight's agenda before we move to a discussion on our council schedule. Anyone from the public wishing to comment this evening?
There are no raised hands, and again, no messages in the chat.
All right, very good. And a reminder to all that you can email us at council@bloomington.in.gov. And we will now move to a discussion on our council schedule. And seeing that we have no matters for first reading, I would imagine we will not need a committee of the whole on the 9th. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, I move that we cancel the committee of the whole for February the 9th.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion on that? All right, if the clerk would go ahead and call the roll on that.
Councilmember Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Rosenberger,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Volin,
Yes,
and Scambaluri.
Yes.
And that passes 900. And so anything else that we need to discuss for our schedule coming up?
There is a work session on this coming Friday, February the 4th at noon, and that will take place via the Zoom platform.
Do we have an idea of what topics are going to be on that agenda?
I'm not sure at this point. I think that will be finalized in the next day or so.
So do we need to have a show of hands as to who is available and interested in attending a work session? I see at least 5 hands popping up, so we will go ahead and keep that on the schedule and find out when we get there as to what topics we'll need to be discussing. Okay, and with our committee of the whole canceled for next week, the interview teams are hard at work to have their first organizational meetings to figure out the vacancies for our boards and commissions. So that might be a good opportunity for more work along those lines. So again, thank you all. At this point in time, we have concluded our business for the night. So any motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, and good evening all, and be very, very careful out there. I hope you can all stay home. Thank you.